All right, looks like systems are go. Very interesting week so far, too. We got a lot to talk about. Mainly, I want to talk about the show a bit. So much has changed, and I'm excited to focus the show in some interesting ways. And when I say so much has changed, I mean, look at Spaces. They have video on Spaces now. It's wild. So let's do it. Let's start the show and dive into it. I think King Solomon might be stopping by as well. And yeah, I actually have another Spaces coming up today, which will be interesting too at the HBAR Foundation, which will be kind of cool. But without further ado.
And we're live. You're listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts show.
Hosted by Brandon Davenport, aka itsbrandond.
Right on. It is Wednesday, March 13th, 2024. Hashgraph Enthusiasts, episode 116. What is this show even? Yeah, so video Spaces. It's kind of crazy. I'm one of the big pieces of feedback I've heard about the show is the video component. You know, when I started the show back in October 2021, it was audio only, right? It was on Clubhouse. You know, there wasn't a whole lot to it. I was doing the show for a small amount of people. Now it's grown. There's like hundreds of listeners to the Spaces every week. And it's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, everywhere else. Oh yeah. So if you're on a computer, you might not see the video feed. I think it might be mobile only. Maybe it's only me who's seeing it. Who knows? But yeah, I started the show October 2021, Clubhouse, audio only, got on all sorts of different platforms. And, you know, when I started doing the video version, it was really interesting. I started doing it, I think kind of like December, so it hasn't been too long. And that's one of the key pieces of feedback I got about the show is like, it'd be great to have video. It'd be great to be able to like see the screen, you know, different things you're working on and everything. Obviously you can't see it on the Spaces. But that's been a big thing. Also like more short form content, all sorts of different things. And I've got a lot of feedback about the show. I've also like been experimenting a ton with the different types of programming, the news, interviews, all those different types of things. And I think that it's time to kind of open things up. I'm planning on doing like a bit of a survey for the community to kind of give feedback on the show, share ideas. I think that live video is going to be a big part of the show going forward. So I don't know. We'll talk about it a bit later. But I definitely have some ideas on kind of where the show could be heading. And I think that largely is, you know, going to be controlled by listeners, which I'm excited about. So let me see. What do we want to dive into? Quick shout out too to supporters. Hashgraph.news has all the info for the show, ways to support the show. You can send HBAR to an address. Allows me to upgrade the show, get equipment, try out some new experiments like video and stuff. So really appreciate supporters. And the other thing too is all the past episodes are there. Lots of great information. Hashgraph.news. Check it out. Really appreciate everybody. Maybe I'll just kick it off today, talking about some thoughts I have regarding a conversation that I had on Spaces. It was actually really, really cool. So there was a Twitter Spaces that was hosted by Genfinity. Shout out to King Solomon and the Genfinity team. They had a conversation where they had Charles Atkins, the president of Hedera, up on the Spaces talking about Hedera, talking about the ecosystem, all those different types of things. And a huge topic, of course, was retail versus enterprise. As I've talked about on the show, kind of like these two separate worlds a little bit. And for me, on that Spaces, it was very interesting to kind of hear the transparency from Charles' end, talking about, the governing council and really like the self-awareness around the whole retail enterprise type thing. It was very refreshing. I'd encourage anyone to kind of go listen to that Spaces. It was really great. But one of the questions I asked Charles that was kind of interesting to me was, I was like, is this whole kind of retail enterprise thing unique to Hedera, or are there other networks, or in your experience, have you kind of seen this play out in other places? Because being, an HBAR in this ecosystem, it's, really top of mind for everybody, I feel, every day. The concepts of retail enterprise, DEXs and small projects versus like governing council members and, huge organizations and stuff like that. And what he said to me was he said, 1,000% that dynamic is unique to Hedera. And I think someone else chimed in and said, XRP maybe. But that was pretty interesting to hear from the president of Hedera through his experience, like being in Web3 for a long time, working with enterprise, kind of saying like, listen, this situation is pretty unique to Hedera. But he did mention that, in his previous positions at other networks, he said it was really, really hard for us to get partnerships with enterprises. And he said with Hedera, it's the conversations are much different. And I think that for me, like in my mind, immediately I was like, at this point in the Web3 industry, like having resistance to enterprise and having difficulties on that side, it would be like a really, really, really difficult thing. So I think that Hedera is in a good position. And the other thing that he said too, that I found interesting was like, that I actually was a bit surprised about. Hashpack was on the conversation too, Mark from Hashpack, but it was this kind of thing where he was trying to, okay, interesting. So some people can't see the video on Spaces. I'll take a screenshot just so like, there, just so there's proof. I waved at the camera just so there's proof that there's video on this thing. I have no idea how video Spaces work. To be honest, I literally, when I was setting up the Spaces for the show this week, I was getting it set up, doing all my stuff, and literally it was just a toggle on the Spaces that was like, hey, do you want to enable video? And I was like, hell yeah. So I honestly have no idea if it's working. Spaces barely works anyways to begin with. So we'll have to see. If anyone... how's this? If anyone's watching or listening right now and can see the video, like take a screenshot and post it to X. Cause I'm interested to see like my video I'm seeing on my end is pretty clear, but I'm interested to see like if it's like really low quality. But back to Charles and that Spaces. It was really interesting because he's talking about the governing council and recently he's made very, concerted efforts to make it clear that the governing council is much more aware of the projects on Hedera, of these kind of dynamics playing out than we might think. And even Mark from Hashpack was like, yeah, we were talking with some governing council members and they were saying, we use Hashpack all the time and this and that. And I was kind of on the Spaces like a little bit surprised. I even said that to Charles. I was like, this is a little bit surprising that there's these, positive feedback loops happening between the community and the governing council that we're just not aware of. So Charles comes across to me as someone that both is very upfront with kind of like the downsides and struggles within the Hedera governing council, all those different types of things. Like he's much more candid with that kind of stuff, which I appreciate, but also he's like letting us know about these positive things happening, these good feedback loops that are happening, that we just never known about. So my main takeaway from that conversation, from that Spaces with the president of Hedera was kind of like, and granted, he's only been there for like 85 days or something, but it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, if there is this like really positive conversation happening, if the governing council members are really way more into it and aware and plugged in than we think, then like shouldn't the community know that? Like, wouldn't that let a lot of pressure off? So I don't know. I think it just comes back to what we were talking about on previous episodes when we had kind of some flare-ups in the community of like, clearly there's some kind of like communication information kind of breakdown. But what I got from that Spaces was like, it appears that the president of Hedera, Charles, the governing council, those folks are, I think, well aware of it, self-conscious about it, making changes to deal with it. And we're just going to have to see how it plays out. I've been seeing some really positive changes. Like, for example, like the HBAR Foundation has been tweeting out a lot about projects they've never really tweeted about before. Like, or I shouldn't say that, but in the same capacity of just maybe giving shout outs, right? I've seen it for like HBAR Foundation or H Suite now, some of the other DeFi applications, like some of these projects that have kind of not flooded the HBAR Foundation, but kind of expressed criticisms about the HBAR Foundation, their experience with the HBAR Foundation. It appears that there kind of has been close to like a 180 from the foundation, just from an optics standpoint. So I don't know. I'm getting the sense that the community is really having an impact at a very high level. And obviously it's going to play out, kind of slowly, but when I really think about it, it's like, there are some tangible actions being taken. There is some change happening, which is great to see. Real quick too, I'm on another Spaces today at 4 p.m. Oh, real quick. And also too, in the midst of, video Spaces and everything, I forgot to pin the tweet to the top. The tweet pinned to the top of the Spaces has all the info about the show this week, ways to support, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, I'm on a Spaces later today as well, 4 p.m. Eastern, with the HBAR Foundation. As a lot of folks know, I'm the director of communications at Hgraph, so I'm actually going to be joining Tierbot, HBAR Suite, and the Mouth on HBAR Foundation Spaces to kind of like talk about these projects and share some more info. So if anyone's curious, check that out. That's later today. Okay, so another really funny thing that I saw was some folks on the Hedera subreddit were rather excited because it appears as though Hedera has its first mention on Wall Street Bets. So there's a subreddit, for folks familiar with Reddit, there's a subreddit, Wall Street Bets, infamous in the crypto financial space. So yeah, basically, Hedera got a mention in the kind of the degen zone. Pretty bullish, kind of funny to see. We've actually kind of been seeing quite a bit of that, like Hedera getting that kind of exposure. Someone commented, "Let the summoning begin." Yeah, I did an HBAR summoning circle recently, which I believe was some help. But I may have to do another. We'll have to see. One thing that's great about, and again, I don't know if everyone can see the video, but one thing that's great about video is like when I'm doing just audio on the show, I have to like announce when I'm doing stuff. Like, for example, if I go to like take a drink of a beverage or something, I have to be like, okay, I'm going to take a drink real quick. So you're going silent and people don't know what you're doing. So it's kind of cool on video. Like people can see me. Obviously audio version of the show, not going away, but video stuff is pretty cool. I want to go to, I would say, kind of a main topic today. And also too, anyone listening, feel free to request to speak. That's another thing with the show. Definitely want to make it more engaging. I get a lot of really positive feedback about interviews and stuff. So definitely open to having more people up on the show. But this was interesting. So, and this is a pretty substantial, big topic. I'm going to talk about the new Airdrop HIP for Hedera. I had a great conversation recently with Patches about this. And Patches really is one of the key minds behind this Hedera improvement proposal. And maybe I'll give a bit of quick background on kind of what all this is about and why it's so important. I would say this is probably one of the most important things that's happening right now. So on Hedera, you have a function called token association. For those unfamiliar, on a lot of Web3 networks, basically, when you have a wallet, anyone can kind of throw anything inside your wallet, right? So you have effectively kind of like crypto spam, right? Essentially, which is, can make things kind of difficult. And I think that on Hedera, with the construction of the network and kind of the thinking behind what Lehman Baird was developing is, for an enterprise, it might not be a great idea for an enterprise to maybe have a wallet and then have a bunch of random stuff thrown in it. It might, cause them to break the law out of their controller. Who knows, whatever it could be. So there was this idea of consent on this network where we have a token association function, which basically means that if you have a project or if you have a token or whatever it may be, and you want to airdrop it into a bunch of people's wallets, as happens on, in Web3, you would, start your project and send everyone a bunch of your free token, which is cool, but again, can lead to spam. So on Hedera, you basically, as a user, have to first associate a token, right? Or more specifically, a token ID, whether it's for an NFT or a fungible token, before that can be sent to your wallet. So the upside to that is clear. It's like, okay, the users are in control. We can avoid having spam on the network in a large capacity, and people's wallets will kind of remain clean. And also enterprises will be able to function with much more control, with that kind of not just being a wallet feature, but it's also just a core aspect of the network. The downsides to that are that a lot of these kind of business workflows and stuff that Web3 projects have, or just kind of in general, on Hedera, it creates a really big pain point for airdrops, right? So maybe an NFT project, maybe a utility project, maybe a fungible token, who knows what it is, a meme coin, whatever it is. It creates a huge barrier for them because they're not able to just do what they usually do, right? Just announce they're doing an airdrop and then, send it to everybody essentially. And also too, even if the user, for example, goes, oh, I love this project, I'd love to get it in my wallet. Maybe I'm a bit new to Hedera, right? That's the whole point, onboarding people. But those people might miss out on the airdrop because maybe they don't realize they have to associate, or maybe, it creates an extra step, right? So this can be viewed two ways. This functionality on Hedera can be viewed two ways. It can be viewed as, oh, thank God, we've got more control on this network over our wallet and account, and we can, essentially be a little safer on this network. And it's much more enterprise friendly, right? So that's the upside. The downside is that as we're trying to, as an industry, make it easier to onboard into Web3, and as we're trying to make it more frictionless to participate in Web3, this token association function on Hedera adds, an extra layer of friction for both the user and for the project. So there's upsides and downsides to it. I think that in whole, people view the associate token function on Hedera as like a net positive. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, is there another way, right? Is there a way to get the best of both worlds? And there kind of is, and it's in the form of this HIP. So basically what this HIP does is it creates kind of two new elements to the network, two new elements to Hedera accounts. One of which is the token associate function. Without getting too technical, it allows you to effectively turn off token association for an account. So there's a new flag that you can set that basically says, for this account, allow anything to be dumped into it. Have it operate like, have it operate like a Solana wallet or an Ethereum wallet or something. Just open it up and we can put whatever we want into it. And a wallet can be, configured that way. The other thing that it does is it creates a new airdrop function that essentially allows you to send a token to anybody, but it doesn't land in their wallet. It kind of gets queued up in an inbox that then the user can kind of go into that inbox and kind of see like, what airdrops do I have waiting for me? And do I want to associate them or not? So for example, if you have a project and you want to airdrop a bazillion NFTs or tokens or something to folks on the network and you send it out, you're not going to get errors for people that haven't associated the token. It's just going to land in that inbox. So maybe some folks have associated the token. They'll get it no problem, just as usual as it currently happens. Maybe some people have disabled token association on their wallet altogether, right? So they'll get it no problem. But then maybe some people have just kind of left their wallets alone as they are right now. Well, there's this new kind of functionality on the network now that will, instead of throwing you an error and saying you can't airdrop it to this person they haven't associated, it allows you to airdrop it, and it just kind of sits in a queue for that person, right? Like an inbox. And they open the inbox, they can see what has been airdropped to them, and they can choose to accept it or not. So from that perspective, you know, it creates just new options for people. Now, I mean, there's different extremes to this, right? The one extreme would be like, well, just flip the switch for everybody and disable token association across the network. I think there's a lot of people that would like that. I kind of disagree with that. I think that fundamentally token association is super important. So, I mean, my take on this HIP, which appears to be HIP 904, Hedera Improvement Proposal 904. I think this is great. I think it's awesome. And I think that, of course, you know, it's not going to come without challenges, but I think that the key challenge here is more on user experience. It's more with the user interface, with the wallet, right? What that inbox looks like. How do you deal with that spam that maybe comes into the wallet? All those different types of things. So it'll be really, really interesting. Another kind of security element to this HIP is like, it's the sender that's paying the association fee and a lot of those different other fees. So if you wanted to do a big spamming campaign and flood a bunch of wallets, it would be really cost prohibitive. So it's not like doing transaction spam and stuff. It would be much more expensive to do that. So lots of different things to think about. We can dive so much deeper into this. I think that I want to leave it there for now, just because this HIP is going to change. There's going to be a lot that kind of happens. I'd encourage anybody, if you're a developer listening to the show, or if you're just a community member, maybe have strong opinions on airdrops on Hedera and stuff like that, go into GitHub, you know, be a part of the conversation with this, make the changes you want to see. That's kind of what this is all about. So go check it out. And I imagine as it gets closer to last call, maybe I'll have Patches stop by, or someone from Swirls Labs on the show to talk more about what the final form of this looks like and the different ramifications that come with that for the network. So that'll be kind of cool. But that is it. HIP 904. I dig it. I'm bullish on HIP 904. Another really, really big topic that just popped off, I feel like today, like just hours ago, it feels like. So Hedera has positioned itself very cleverly in the industry, in the blockchain industry. And I think has obviously done things in a very counterintuitive way. And I think in a way that turns a lot of people off. And I'm talking about like ESG, climate friendliness, a lot of that deep enterprise stuff. And obviously we've seen huge success with projects like Dovu, also infrastructure like the Guardian, digital monitoring, reporting and verification, right? DMRV methodologies and stuff, the digitalization of carbon offset credits, you know, ecological products, all those different types of things. Hedera is seeing a lot of success with that and a lot of traction, but I don't think anything quite like this yet. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how this unfolds. But the headline here is basically Hedera is being used by the blockchain for energy. There's like a carbon solution that's being built by Blockchain for Energy, which is like a consortium of members that include Chevron, Devon Energy, ExxonMobil, Saudi Aramco, you know, so many so many different like major energy companies. Like, I mean, ExxonMobil, like Jesus, and Hedera as well. And so basically what's emerging here is like an AI enabled carbon capture offset solution leveraging Hedera that's going to be used by members of this blockchain for energy group that includes, again, like these massive companies. Like, for example, Saudi Aramco is the fourth largest company in the world, market cap of $2 billion, just behind NVIDIA. So like, these are giant companies. And of course, the first thing that pops to my mind is like, what are the transactions that are going to be running, you know, through this? What is the revenue that's going to be generated, you know, for the network? And for me, it feels very similar to a lot of the different use cases we've been seeing on the network. And I'm still learning about these different types of use cases. One of my favorite guests to have on the show is Matt Smith. He's from Dovu, like just a wealth of information. But I think the most interesting thing about this story that a thread I wanted to pull on is the mention of Tollum Earth. I think a huge topic in this space for Hedera, and again, just to kind of remind people what interests me the most, and again, this was part of my conversation with Matt Smithies from Dovu, was what we're talking about here when we talk about these digital credits, these carbon offsets, right? What we're talking about are NFTs being minted on Hedera that can be purchased by anybody on a marketplace and held in a wallet and later sold on the marketplace to be purchased by maybe other people for speculative reasons, or maybe by somebody or an enterprise or organization that wants to purchase it to redeem it or sequester it or take action on it in some way. A great example is what Dovu is working on with the Indian government. You know, the Indian government wants to retire, 20 million vehicles. So basically you can go on the Dovu website, buy these offset credits that represent a vehicle that's been retired, and essentially what that credit can be used for, the utility of that NFT is for someone to go and relinquish that NFT for a discount on a new, carbon friendly vehicle. Or you can just hold it in your wallet and sell it on a marketplace later, when it moons or whatever. So it's this interesting dynamic of, I look at the NFT ecosystem on Hedera, I look at the NFT ecosystem more broadly. People can kind of, say, oh, this is degen or whatever it might be. But for me, I kind of go, there's about to be a whole new class of almost like collectible, and it's these digitized carbon offset tokens, right? These NFTs that is just going to create a whole new marketplace. I think that a lot of people are going to get rich off this. I think a lot of people, the industry is going to blow up because it's going to be like a sudden change to like transparency, fast speed, low cost in a carbon offset market that has been like, no transparency, full of fraud, and very slow. So it's like when you have supply increase, when you have demand increase, it just creates more liquidity and more volume and more adoption. And we've heard in the past, on both the supply and demand side, we've heard from Microsoft that there aren't enough credits in the world to offset their company's carbon footprint. But then on the other hand, we've heard that there are lots of projects that want to issue credits that maybe aren't big companies or big consortiums. Like maybe it's a small farm, or maybe it's an animal sanctuary, or some kind of project that's helping the environment that wants to be able to issue credits for that. And like, obviously that's a huge amount of people, and it's very difficult for those small projects to like get those credits issued. It's a long legal process, all these types of things. So I look at Dovu, what they're doing with Dovu OS. I look at this story and like Innovate AI, and like, okay, so we're using AI to help move through that process, tokenize these credits, make them available on a marketplace. have it be transparent. And to me, it's, it sounds like it sounds like NFT drops. It sounds like a little engine that can be plugged into to NFT purchasers and buyers. So, and these NFTs are HIP 412 compliant, and new standards are being made all the time. And I just find it very interesting to think that this whole different investment class that can be speculative, which is carbon offset credits, is coming to Hedera as NFTs. I think that's just very, very fascinating. And I'd be interested to know, like, from people, if anyone has purchased one of those carbon credits off the Dovu marketplace or something, what's that experience been like? What's your strategy for that asset? All those different types of things. Very curious to know. Another thing I want to talk about today too is the recent HBAR Bull episode. I thought it was really great. Shout out to Brandon, the HBAR Bull. Always really great stuff. On the kind of like Shark Bites episode, on that segment, Rob Allen said a couple things that I found very, very interesting, because I felt like a few of the things that Rob Allen was talking about later on yesterday on the Spaces with Charles Atkins, the president of Hedera, also spoke to a few of those points and kind of created a little bit of a more complete picture behind the scenes, which I thought was very interesting. So basically, number one interesting thing I thought from that interview was the question came up of like, well, what's going on with, governing council members that have low attendance to meetings, that aren't really engaged. And Rob Allen basically came out, and again, Rob Allen, reminder, he's on Australian Payments Plus, he's on the governing council. He says, some of the council members just haven't been engaged. And those that aren't engaged, and then there was like a camera cut. It's at like 45 minutes, 30 seconds. So I think that there was a bit of a spicier take that wasn't in the episode. Found that kind of interesting. But definitely, it's clear that there are governing council members on Hedera that aren't super engaged, and it just is what it is. But on that, there was like another interesting point that was raised by Rob Allen that we've talked about before on the show, but to be honest, I haven't thought about it recently, which is the dynamic, the dynamic change that will come when the governing council is full. Like, when this governing council is full of members and there is no available spots, and there are, let's say, a pipeline of people that are waiting to join the council, I think it's going to change the dynamic a little bit. It might make the governing council members a little more competitive, a little it might make them work a little harder to keep their spot. I think that what I'm realizing is a lack of engagement early on might just be more of a product of like the fact that the council isn't full yet, the fact that there are free slots available there. There's just an interesting dynamic, and Rob Allen hinted at that. He made it pretty clear, and I have to agree with that. The other thing that he said that I thought was interesting was a lot of folks saw that announcement about Karotica moving to Arbitrum. Obviously, Karotica kind of, using, it's an NFT project, like I think related to Karate Combat. They're using some IP, some open source IP from Karate Combat. But I think that part of the freak out from the community was like, oh my God, is Karate Combat moving, from Hedera to Arbitrum? And it's like, no, that's not the case. It's just this NFT project that's moving. And then Rob Allen said, they're going to experience the frailty of other networks. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty bold. So shout out to Rob. I dig it. And also too, it's like Brandon, the HBAR Bull, also said maybe there's a foundation, like some of these foundations do outbid each other. So like, for example, if the HBAR Foundation makes a bid to have a project develop on Hedera, another foundation on another network might make a more favorable competitive bid compared to the HBAR Foundation. So sometimes it's literally just that. Sometimes it's just projects looking for where they can get the best start. Which again, you can't blame them for that. That's business, but it could also just be one of those things where, Karotica got a much more appealing situation on Arbitrum. Who knows? I have to say that there's something to be said about projects that are kind of like dedicated to the network that they're on and kind of champion it, not to be tribalist or not to be, like a maxi or anything, but more to be excited. Like I always am pleasantly surprised and delighted when a project is like excited to be building on the network that they're on genuinely and seem to be like fans of the community and stuff. So I don't know. Another topic they spoke on, and this is kind of where Charles' comments kind of come in, is they spoke about BitGo as the new governing council member. Lots of people are very, stoked about BitGo as a council member. For folks watching the video, I'll pull up the announcement. Let me see here. Blog. There we go. Hedera redid their website a little bit. It's a little better. So yeah, BitGo joined the governing council. This was great to see. I think that there was like an interesting insight that emerged for me. I was watching Rob Allen's interview, like I said, on the HBAR Bowl, and he mentioned that kind of like BitGo, and again, quick refresh. BitGo is like a huge company. They custody a lot of the assets for example, like some of the larger Bitcoin ETFs and, manage tons of assets. They, manage billions of HBAR and all sorts of different things like that. They run 6 mirror nodes. Like they are, if you want to talk about enterprises building on Hedera, like BitGo is BitGo. And the really interesting thing for me was the fact that I think the posture of the council in the past with BitGo wanting to join the council was like, for whatever reason, they just didn't see it fitting into the council. And that's what kind of Rob Allen said was like, initially we didn't really understand like what they were bringing to the table or blah, 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 or whatever it might be. And over time they made a very strong case for what they would bring. And so it's like, okay, it's a story of a little bit of skepticism, a longer onboarding process. BitGo really, made a strong case for what they would bring. And the other surprising thing that Rob Allen said was like the governing council was surprised at how excited the community was, which I also thought was weird. Like, of course, the community is going to be excited about a giant, crypto Web3 enterprise joining the governing council, of course. So that was kind of weird. And so after that, when I was on the spaces yesterday with the president of Hedera, Charles, and he was talking about this, he kind of expanded on that a little bit more. And he said, some of the original council members were not really warmed up to the idea of Web3 companies in general. And on one hand, it kind of makes sense. It's like, okay, when you look at the council and the original council members, it's like, doesn't exactly like scream Web3. We got IBM and Boeing and this and that. So it's like, it wasn't like, this kind of hip council. So I get that idea, but I mean, 4 or 5 years later, I mean, Chainlink is kind of one of the only ones on the council. So it was like, that was a really weird thing that the president of Hedera would share that insight, that there was a narrative, in his words, that was kind of like anti-Web3 company in the governing council. Mind you, a council that's governing a Web3 network. So I don't know. I think for me, there's a few conflicting ideas in my mind. And I think that I'm kind of surprised that it took this long. If BitGo is in the pipeline, as long as it's said that they have been, then like, it's kind of shocking that the governing council would not push them through, but clearly the case was made, they're in. And I think Rob Allen said it best at the end. He's like, he said, quote, the wisdom of the community is greater than the wisdom of the council, it seems. So again, feeding back into that self-awareness narrative, what the council is like, I really feel, the council seeing kind of the power of the community, not just on social media, but also like actual network metrics. What's being driven by, dexes and wallets and all these different types of things. Like Charles even said on the Spaces, he was saying a lot of enterprises, most enterprises end up using tools that are built by community members. He's like, that's true in Web 2 and Web 3. So that was interesting. So it's like, I don't know. I think there's a fresh perspective at the council. I think that there's a fresh approach. I just think that putting it into practice is going to take a bit of time. But the other thing too was I'm feeling really, really, I feel like it's very likely we're going to have a full council by the end of the year. Rob Allen said, don't bet against a full Hedera council by the end of the year. And then also Charles said on that Spaces, he said his personal goal is to fill the council by the end of the year. So, reminder, last year we were told the same thing, but I think, bear market, and then also like the many, many changes that happened with the membership committee and how they onboard council members. Obviously there was a bit of a slowdown, but it feels like new procedures are in place, a new structure's in place. And we've had 3 new governing council members this year so far. We're at a clip of 1 per month. So if we extrapolate on that and we've got, like 7 or 8 or whatever council members left, it makes it if we stay at this clip, highly likely, I would say that we have a full council by end of year. So that's very exciting to see as well. I'm trying to think of who's going to be on the council. I think that there's going to be one big one. I do think that there's been hinting at it. And I think there is going to be a huge council member equal to the size of, a Google. And I think that it's something that began years ago and is going to take a long time to get over the line. And I think they're looking for that kind of dynamite council member, right? They're looking for a Microsoft, they're looking for a Tesla, they're looking for an NVIDIA, right? And they're looking for one of those that's going to be building on the network, because that's what's going to get traction. Like at the end of the day, what it comes down to is if there's a massive headline that comes out about, Microsoft joins governing council and has launched, this application on Hedera and all that kind of stuff. It's like, I really think that Hedera is trying to tee up to like the big one. So that's kind of where my mind goes when it comes to the council. And on episodes in the past, we've gone over like the predictions and who could be on the council and this and that. So I have a feeling soon we might have to do another one of those. Maybe do like a tier list of that would be fun. Do one of those like tier lists of upcoming potential council members and like how good they are and likely they are or something. I don't know. Could be something fun there. VR Jam. This was one that's like really quick. I had talked about this last week briefly. And last week was a crazy show because I just got back from Ethereum Denver and had a lot to talk about. It was also great having like some folks from Swirls on the show and everything, but talked about VR Jam a little bit. Didn't really understand a whole lot about what's going on with it, and let listeners know or watchers know that like come back with a bit more info. There was a really good interview on the HBAR bull. Go check out his show. Did a great interview with the founder of it. But basically, they are doing kind of like VR experiential marketing type stuff. And they're leveraging Hedera probably for, tokenized aspects of it. They're going to have an IDO March 26th. I think that the most fascinating thing was like when we talk about virtual experiences, music, those different types of things, concerts, and, they did work for Glastonbury. They've had Red Bull as a client. So like they're very, it's a very established kind of media company. And I think enough that it caused the founder to like close down his existing business and kind of go full Web3. The first kind of dive into Web3, they were building on Polygon, and they've migrated their whole token strategy and their whole tech stack to Hedera. So this is a use case that tries out another network, can't get it working properly, migrating to Hedera to give it another shot. That's a narrative we've kind of been seeing quite a bit. Very interesting to see play out. We've also seen it the other way too. Like we literally just talked about a project, Karateka, that's doing the opposite. So I think as we're in this kind of multi-chain industry, like we're going to see a lot of hopping around. But cool to see another one come to Hedera. One thing that also is interesting is one of their old clients was Meta. Obviously, it makes sense, Meta being all about VR and different stuff like that. Meta was an ex-client. And so the co-founder said, they're not a fan. They're not a fan of Meta. They're not a fan of what they're doing. I think it's a big motivation for VR Jam to kind of like do what they're doing in a world where kind of like Meta is taking a different approach with the, metaverse, VR, crypto type stuff. Like, I mean, also too, like whatever happened to like NFTs on Instagram, that was a huge headline. I think maybe early last year in 2022. It's Meta is a weird one to watch. Real quick, I just wanted to take a minute just before we dive into our next stories. I'm going to talk about SaucerSwap. SaucerSwap has some very, very, very exciting stuff coming out. I'm actually like so stoked about it. But just wanted to give another huge thank you to supporters of the show. I appreciate all you guys. The show is basically supported by an HBAR account. And folks have sent, well over 10,000, 15,000 HBAR to that account, been able to purchase equipment, run the show, do all sorts of different things. So like, just appreciate it so much with the supporters. Part of the changes I want to do to the show coming up are like moving beyond this and kind of doing some other things to support the show and kind of have value move both ways. I've been just collecting a bunch of ideas and like crazy concepts over the years that the show's been on. So I'm excited to kind of dive into that stuff this year, but let's just quickly talk about SaucerSwap. And I'm going to play a bit of a video for you folks because it's very, very interesting what I heard, and it kind of gets me really excited. I'm just going to play the whole clip. This is a 4-minute clip, and really kind of the big deal here is SaucerSwap is not only teeing up kind of like two tier 1 exchanges, so like centralized exchanges that are very, very big, that want to list sauce. They're also broadening their exchange strategy and working with exchanges to support HTS tokens. That's been a big bottleneck and pain point in the Hedera ecosystem, is the lack of listings of tokens on centralized exchanges, just because it's just difficult, I think, for those exchanges to integrate the Hedera token service. It's a new technology. So basically, SaucerSwap is making moves to help these exchanges integrate HTS. So I'm going to play this clip. This is Peter from SaucerSwap, kind of like marketing, communications, kind of like what I do a little bit at Hgraph. And he's going to talk about, what's actually happening with these updates. This is part of also their AMA they do on Discord. But this is a great clip. I'm going to play it. And this is kind of what's popping off with SaucerSwap.
Thanks for the question. I know it's a hot topic. We actually received many more questions about centralized exchange listings than the ones that we're just reading for this AMA. I think there was about 10 of them. So we will give you some color and updates regarding the centralized exchange listings right now. First of all, there has been no shift in priority regarding the listings. They are still actively being worked on. We have made progress with the tier 1 centralized exchanges mentioned in the last AMA. Now, there are 2 in particular that are firmly tier 1s that are our top priority. As context from the last AMA, they have told us that they love SaucerSwap, they love the project, the active community, the on-chain metrics, seeing our rank on DeFi Llama, surpassing QuickSwap, getting up there with Camelot and Trader Joe. Basically, all the project criteria is met. There are a couple of challenges that we are working through. The main challenge is that the Hedera token service is not integrated on many exchanges, period. So we are doing the hard work of pushing to get the Hedera token service integrated on these top exchanges. Now, the great thing about this is that it will pave the way for other HTS tokens to seamlessly list on those exchanges.
That's key.
The downside is it takes a little bit longer, but to the point that HTS needs to be integrated, we have been working with our partners, including the HBAR Foundation and several prominent market makers, to integrate the Hedera token service into these exchanges, namely these tier 1 exchanges. So we are just as hopeful as we were last AMA about these listings. They unfortunately do not operate on our schedule, and all we can do is be persistent and work with them as efficiently as possible. That's exactly what we're doing. Second point we want to make regarding the centralized exchanges is that we have broadened our strategy a bit to additionally consider listing on other exchanges that might not necessarily be tier 1, but will support an overall approach that includes both top and other reputable non-tier 1 exchanges. So let me be clear, this does not mark a shift from listing on tier 1 exchanges that is still the top priority, but rather it broadens our approach to potentially list on more exchanges. We did want to communicate this in case one of the other exchange listings happens first, just so there's no confusion around.
So that's basically it, is like, this is huge news because, understanding some of the dynamics of DeFi on Hedera, some of the pain points, like there's other things too. Like, for example, oracles were a huge pain point, right? Now we have a few oracles online, Python Network. I think there's like Supra Oracle and stuff like that. So there's oracles coming, which is fantastic. Another big thing was like USDC liquidity. That's been a big problem. So I think there's moves being made on that. And obviously as well, HTS tokens, like maybe some of these meme coins or also Dovu or like whatever, being able to be, or in Sauce, being able to be listed on centralized exchanges, that's been really difficult. So, and I think that's probably the biggest one. To be honest, centralized exchange listings are probably one of the biggest, that and the USDC liquidity is probably one of the biggest barriers to entry for the ecosystem. Cause it's like, how do you get HBAR? How do you get, Sauce? How do you get these tokens, these ecosystem products? The only way to do that right now for a lot of people is to first get HBAR, right? And then, move into the ecosystem to pay for fees and go on SaucerSwap and swap. It's too many steps. It would be crazy if, for example, on Coinbase, you could go in and buy Sauce directly and not have it be like a wrapped Sauce, right? Have it be actually inside of a native Hedera account and not, for example, have to bridge it. That I think is like the big win here. So yeah, I mean, huge shout out to SaucerSwap. And I mean, one other thing that I'm digging about SaucerSwap is they're really kind of, helping bolster the narrative of how efficient Hedera is. They sent out a tweet recently, a post, a xeet, whatever we're calling it. Someone posted and they said, it's $82 of gas to convert $83 of Pepe to ETH, right? So it's another post complaining about fees, right? SaucerSwap hits it again, right? They're saying as market activity ramps up, we're going to see more people complaining about fees. Hedera DEXs are a great alternative. Check out SaucerSwap. So there's a real narrative forming to this bull market of fees, cost savings. But again, it's like you can shout from the rooftops all day about how great Hedera is and the lower fees and this and that. And, but if it's difficult to get into the ecosystem, if you can't just, for example, go to Coinbase and buy, an HBAR token or something like that easily, then that's kind of null and void. So it's both working together. So it's great to see SaucerSwap kind of working both sides of that and clearing the path, straight up, if they can get this work done and make it easy and get that HTS integration with exchanges, like it just opened things up for everybody. So here for it, dig in SaucerSwap. Quick shout out too to Earthlings. They're going to be doing their INO, initial NFT offering. And they're going to be doing a bunch of cool stuff on Headstarter. And it's kicking off March 19th through March 20th. The reason I brought it up, and I touched on it a couple weeks ago, but these HBAR weighted airdrops and all sorts of different ways airdrops are being done on Hedera. There's a lot of different creative things that I think that, again, that HIP that we talked about might disrupt, but there's a lot of creative things happening, like projects doing HBAR weighted airdrops, right? So airdropping stuff to people based on how much HBAR they hold. That's interesting, right? Because it creates activity in the ecosystem, and there's things being done based off of a token association and all sorts of different creative things. So this is another creative kind of initial NFT offering that, not financial advice, but definitely just check it out, participate, or just kind of observe. I'm just going to be watching it. Just because it's an interesting dynamic, HBAR weighted token drops and airdrops and INOs and stuff like that. It's interesting. Steam token is the token. So I'm going to be watching that. On this topic too, I think a big piece of news and regarding TuneFM Jam token. Yesterday, they published a update on their tokenomics, and a few key points, right? $30 million has been raised through various forms of capital investment. Over 1 billion Jam token has been staked in the Jam Treasury whale bond staking program. The program incentivizes large Jam purchases and long-term holding. There's like over-the-counter buyers, and essentially like additional Jam token is going to have to be minted to fulfill obligations to, again, over-the-counter buyers, purchase programs, bondholders. And so they're basically, sections of the white paper of the tokenomics for TuneFM, kind of throwing it out the window a little bit, firing from the hip. They're saying, they're transitioning to a minting as an on-needed basis due to changing prices and all those different types of things. A 10% fee on platform transactions, acting as a deflationary pressure on tokenomics. And they're hoping to reach a deflationary state when the project achieves scale and real world adoption and stuff like that. So, tough to know kind of what to make of this. I mean, I think they hit it on the head. It's like managing tokenomics is an art form requiring careful consideration and community support. So, I mean, my take is like definitely a strange approach. I think that firing from the hip in this regard is going to be tough. There definitely has been a lot of resistance to this announcement and some upset and stuff. I'm sure there's people that also kind of agree with it or can see the merit in it. So again, I mean, TuneFM has kind of been firing from the hip. I think a lot of projects have been firing from the hip in this recent market. So we'll have to see, but that's the update. I haven't been like super, immersed in TuneFM as of late. I did bump into Andrew, the founder of TuneFM in Denver for ETH Denver, which was great to see Andrew. I mean, talk about OGs in the Hedera ecosystem. So that was really cool. I think there's like a picture or something. Here we are. For the folks watching the video version, I'll just pull this up. Here's me and Andrew chilling at Ethereum Denver at the Hedera Validation Cloud Party. Great guy. Lots of great stories. And interesting approach to tokenomics. I will say, I'd say that largely the response to this has been negative, but I mean, it is what it is. I think that music, there's also like other macro factors too, like the music industry, music in Web3. It's definitely an uphill battle in a lot of regards. So there's also that. We'll have to see. I'm interested to also hear kind of other folks' thoughts on that kind of update and kind of keeping up with TuneFM. Also a project that's been making like big waves and big moves is Dovu, and they've sent out a couple updates that got me pretty excited. One of those updates was regarding exchanges. And I love to see this from projects. If people remember, Dovu sent out some posts recently kind of saying like, we're going to be listed on 2 new exchanges this month, right? They said that in February. And in February, those 2 new exchange listings were launched. So I think that created a lot of faith in Dovu for kind of following through with promises. And after following through with those promises, Dovu is hitting people up now with more promises, which is exciting. So the first one is really making it clear to people that they said, quote, "We're not going to limit ourselves to just a couple of centralized exchanges. Token liquidity is a very important part of the Dovu operating system. We're going to be turning up the volume and growing our community." So clearly with, reading in between the lines, it's like, more exchange listings coming. They also shared a post by the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, who has, obviously been a big character in crypto recently. But the SEC made a post saying they've adopted rules to enhance and standardize climate-related disclosures by public companies and in public offerings. So basically, when a company wants to go public, that company is then going to have to be much more transparent with their climate initiatives and what they're doing about those things, in addition to their finances and different business items. So it's like this extra added pressure on most industries for publicly traded companies for that kind of disclosure, for that kind of initiative when it comes to, climate friendliness. And Dovu shares this and they say, it's inevitable, ... So it's clear that Dovu is positioned, and it's clear that they have a product offering that I think, especially with, potential new regulations and the SEC cracking down on those kinds of things, it'll be interesting to see kind of what unfolds from that, and how that kind of changes the dynamic of the project. It could be a very different situation depending on how the government kind of handles these things. And lastly, again, just in line, they tweeted out, "March will be a big month." So, again, implying that, February, March would be bigger than February. So that's kind of crazy. February, 2 new exchange listings. March, what could that mean? Who knows? We're going to be keeping an eye on Dovu, digging it. Quick shout out to Tierbot. There's the Defiance mint. And this kind of dovetails nicely into our one of our last stories here, which is, Hashinals, HCS1, HCS5, HCS20, so many different things happening with this kind of meta protocol on Hedera. The simplest way to put it right now is it replaces IPFS. It allows for permanent immutable file storage on the Hedera consensus service. We went in deep to that on previous episodes. I think episode 114, I had Patches on and we kind of took a deep dive into Hashinals and those different types of things. Go check that out for sure. But yeah, there's this Defiance mint, and drop one is sold out. It's a vibe. The point of this is it's an NFT drop, but again, although it's using the Hedera token service, the inside of the token, instead of pointing to metadata hosted on IPFS or something like that, it's pointing to metadata hosted on HCS. And without getting too technical, how you store data on HCS is like writing it to messages within the topic and writing parts of it, right? So not a Hedera consensus topic message can't hold all of the information required, let's say for a picture or for a metadata file or something. You basically can write it into parts and then assemble it later. So essentially, put very simply, it replaces IPFS, and it means that the NFTs in your wallet and the assets inside of them will never go away because it's not hosted on IPFS, it's hosted on HCS. That's the value proposition for it. Again, it's not going to fit everybody's use case, but it is very, very interesting to kind of see that playing out. So shout out to, Defiance and what they're doing. And there has been some very interesting updates on, what they're doing with Hashinals, and everything like that. So if you I'd assume everybody listening now is following Patches on X. I would say just make sure you are, because I think that there's going to be some crazy stuff happening. But King Solomon, good to see you. That was a great Spaces yesterday with Charles, and appreciate you stopping by, man. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm losing track of time, dude. It's crazy. It's really crazy, seeing the video Spaces.
Oh, you can see it? You can see it?
Yeah, I can see it on my phone. I can see you looking into the mic on my phone.
Gotcha.
It's actually pretty cool. But I feel like it's almost like a more intimate environment. Like even though you can't see my face,
Yeah.
I have to like look at the screen and I'm like,
Gotcha.
I'm talking to you. But yeah, dude, I thought it was a great space. Really looking forward to putting more of those together, kind of with the panel aspect. I think Charles is a wealth of information, and I really wish that we could have had like another half hour, 45 minutes with him personally. But I thought it was good.
Yeah, it was really great. I was surprised. Like, he's very candid about stuff. And I don't know, I talked about this earlier on the show today, but like when he was talking about BitGo joining the governing council, and like that he hinted at like there was early on this kind of narrative in the governing council of like not wanting to have Web3 companies and these different types of things. And it felt like BitGo really had to like make a very strong case to get on the council. And then Rob Allen has recently said like the council was kind of surprised that the community was so excited about BitGo joining. And I was like, well, of course, you know, the community is going to be excited about a Web3 company joining the council. So I don't know if you were kind of surprised by some of that stuff, but I was definitely surprised by some of the things he said.
I haven't had a chance to really dive. I know that he mentioned BitGo's been around for a while, and I've certainly heard the name multiple times. I haven't dug into all of the relationships and kind of financial products and offerings through BitGo yet. I plan to do that as soon as I can, but I'm assuming, I mean, really kind of some of the excitement I guess I would have is with outreach. He mentioned outreach into a ton of different traditional financial entities. If you take it from like the governing board standpoint or any traditional entities wanting to leverage Hedera services, starts getting really interesting when you think about tokenization and traditional financial products and what could potentially happen down the line. He said something specific where it's like, we're going to learn a lot of things even from BitGo with, you know, all the work that they've facilitated over the past, you know, decade or so, or however long it's been. So
it's crazy. They're like, I didn't know this initially, but they were, you know, they're custodying like billions of HBAR, and they're currently running like 6 mirror nodes. So like
I saw the mirror node when I was doing like a tiny bit of due diligence before the space yesterday. I saw that they were running 6 mirror nodes, and which is really interesting, Brandon, because I think you and I can probably remember a couple of years ago. I think there was I don't even know if there was like more than 1 or 2 mirror nodes like a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly.
It was funny because so there is like a public mirror node on Hedera that's like that's like capped and limited. So it's really for testing purposes, but some projects will use it in production. So like, for example, like I work at Hgraph now, and basically we have a hardware mirror node, and we provide services to like, you know, people in the projects in the ecosystem, like Swirlds included and stuff. So it's like there are now, you know, multiple mirror node providers doing those types of things. But also I think in BitGo's case, there's many enterprises and projects that will run their own mirror node for their own purposes, like only for them to use, which is also interesting. Like that's also a way to go about it, is like, well, instead of needing to access a mirror node for my project, like what if I just ran my own and didn't need to use a mirror node provider at all? And so I can see enterprises doing that. And clearly, you know, BitGo having 6, that tells me that there's definitely like some high throughput stuff happening on their end, but it'll be interesting to see like what their actual use case is.
Yeah, he brought up another interesting point yesterday regarding, you know, these kind of traditional entities very much so paying attention to what's being built on the retail side, which I always find, you know, it's not surprising to me at all, but it's interesting to hear him say that. Like there's probably a couple of examples. I think Mark alluded to it from Hashpack, and I'm sure this happens with a bunch of different wallet providers on Hedera and a bunch of different use cases on Hedera. But I remember looking, I think it was Siam Commercial Bank, and was it Shinhan or Standard Bank? One of them that we're doing the stablecoin stuff like maybe 10 months ago. And I watched that. It was like literally just 2 devs, and they did like kind of a workshop thing. And it was really dry kind of content, but I just kind of fast forward and skim through it. And then like 37 minutes in, I'm like, they're using Hashpack for all this shit. And I reached out to Hashpack. I'm like, did you guys know that they're using this? And they're like, no, we had no idea. So I think that stuff happens all the time, probably with a lot of stuff that's been built from community members or projects in this space with these big entities. So
that was the thing I think surprised me the most, was like, it sounds like, and I think that, you know, Charles is making an effort to like be like, no, there's these positive feedback loops happening. You know, he says things like, you know, the governing council is way more aware of, you know, the retail stuff and these smaller projects than you might think. And there's these positive conversations happening. So it's like, there's another part of me that's like, how do we get more visibility on that? Or like, how does the community know about that stuff more? I mean, that Spaces in itself did a great job of surfacing those things, but like, I have the sense now that, and a kind of new type of curiosity about, you know, like what is that all about? Like, how much do they know? Like, what products are they using? I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that of like, you know, I want to dig. I think that's what I wanted to use that other half hour for, is like ask Charles more about, like, tell us more about these conversations you're having and like what, you know, how the governing council members are using the network and stuff. Like, I found that super fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I think it, you know, goes to kind of give a shout out to all the people that have built all this shit. I remember first kind of talking to Patches, like, as just one example, like a couple of years ago when he started with Turtle Moon and all kind of just some of the DeFi tooling that he was building out. And I mean, I think to answer the question, like, I think from your standpoint and my standpoint, I know that you do these spaces every week and you've been doing them forever. I think the big thing that you and I would love to have the opportunity to do, and I know we did this a couple of times last year, it's so hard breaking into some of these traditional entities and getting them to come on and talk about what they're building with the technology. And for me, I mean, I'm very like, I'm very stingy when it comes to that. Like, I want to interview all these people, and I know you're probably the same way. Like, I think it's just getting a foot in the door to get these people, maybe not talking necessarily about the underlying asset, and that's fine, but talking about what they're leveraging the technology for, and then we can make our own assumptions about what happens to the underlying asset. And I think it's just getting our foot in the door to to try to get that first conversation out of the way, make everybody feel comfortable, and then start developing relationships. I think that's where the ticket's at, not only for Hedera, but I think across the board for the mass adoption of crypto and Web3, that stuff's going to start happening.
Like 100%. And you've been doing like like Genfinity's just been doing an amazing job at kind of trying to bridge that a little bit and having spaces. You know, it's crazy to now see spaces where we have like, you know, Grelf up there with like, you know, some kind of like governing council member or something. It's like, we're getting into that territory, and it's happened a few times, but I agree with you. It's like, we got to do more of that. And this kind of, you know, just in general, maybe to take a bit of a left turn while I have you here, like on a different topic of just like having a show in this ecosystem and how things have changed so much. And like, you know, I'm on Spaces right now and there's video. It's like, clearly these platforms are changing and different things like that. I've got the video version of the show now. I'm kind of recently, you know, having a show in this ecosystem focused on news and stuff. I've just felt this like gap forming between like my programming of the show and kind of what I'm doing and kind of where the ecosystem's at and like what the platforms are doing. And I've been trying so many different things. And I just get the sense that I need to like shake up the show in a big way. And as someone else that's like just killing it, you know, in the space doing like programming and news and live content and all that kind of stuff, like what's your take on the pulse of kind of what's going on with, you know, spaces and these platforms and, you know, engagement and different stuff? I'm curious just on that side as someone who's doing this kind of stuff. Like where's your head been at recently after this, you know, bear market heading into a bull market with all this change?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of fell into spaces by default, like back in, what was it, like late 2022? Because we obviously developed a relationship with Hedera, or, you know, and Swirlds, and, you know, that was kind of the starting point. It was purely from like a, you know, let's do a couple of pieces of research and editorials and stuff like that. And then it was almost more of like, I'm a big fan of under promise and over deliver. So it's like, well, let's start doing kind of community spaces and really get, like you mentioned, a finger on the pulse of the community. And that's how we started, just doing rapid fire interviews and all this stuff with Hedera. And then obviously, you know, more ecosystem stuff like that. I think the one thing that's still very interesting to me is like being able to measure what value is actually extracted from these spaces, because I think Charles brought it up briefly yesterday. when he said there's such an overload of information, it's difficult to tell what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
And for those of us, for you and I, when we look at a space, I can probably tell you in 5 seconds if a space has been botted out. And somebody paid $20 to get 5,000 bots in a space. And you see that stuff is just really rampant. There's ways to look at when somebody announces a space, it gets 460 retweets, but 2 comments on it, two comments underneath it. And there's 70,000 people in a space listening to the vice president of Palau. And it's like, okay, there's probably not that many people listening to that guy.
Yeah.
I think it's just, I think that I still don't think that there's any sort of a magic solution to success in this space. I think that the solution is hard work. And I think that people that work hard make their own luck in this space. And you know how hard it is dude, you've done a ton of spaces, you know how hard it is to maintain consistency. I think consistency is still key.
I agree 1,000%. It's like, it's juggling two kind of things. It's knowing that like what you're doing is imperfect and there's so many things you want to change about it and make it better, but like just still executing on this kind of imperfect thing and having that consistency. And for me, it's like, the show's grown enough and has enough support now. And I have all this new equipment, new capabilities and stuff where I'm like, there's an extreme part of me that's like, what is Twitter Spaces even about? Like, that's the name of the show this week is like, what's been on my mind is like, what is this show even? Right. And when I pull back, it's like, well, I started on Clubhouse. And Clubhouse was just this new thing, like live audio, social audio. It was just like, clearly going to change social media. Everyone was kind of going through the pandemic. Everyone was inside, similar to yourself, just kind of falling into it. And then Twitter Spaces came out. It became clear that was the hip spot to go. But now, I'm thinking about, YouTube Live and like, all these other different things and these other platforms, maybe diversifying a little bit. Like, are you guys still specifically like Twitter Spaces, or are you also kind of like, looking at the landscape and trying out some different things?
I think there's going to be a big kind of shift we're definitely going to keep doing the Twitter Space stuff. And I know like, we're on Spotify and the pod. We've actually been reached out to from, I think maybe Spotify or like Podbean or some of the other stuff that's out there. I think it's going to be gears to the grindstone. I don't know. It's interesting because like the Twitter Space stuff, I feel like at some point is going to be like, you and I might be in a perfect position anyways, because I feel like the direction that X is going and Elon's going to go is to try to monetize anything on this space.
Yeah.
So doing Twitter Spaces naturally might be like, might make sense not to go the YouTube route and just keep doing the spaces and maybe do some other stuff on YouTube. But we plan on doing the YouTube stuff. And using different verticals. You brought something up real quick in the last kind of question I wanted to touch on is like finger on the pulse. It's like, how do I feel right now with Hedera and all these other ecosystems? I feel like there's no way that I can keep up with everything that's going on.
Yep.
And sometimes it's frustrating because I want to keep up with everything that's going on. However, I feel like it's a really good thing that I can't keep up with everything that's going on because it's a totally different environment than a year and a half or 2 years ago, where it was like, these are the big things happening in Hedera this week. But now it's like, these are the big things, here's 20 or 30 different big things that are happening today or tomorrow or this week. It's like, that to me shows a strengthening of the ecosystem and growth. And it's like, the one nice thing that you and I probably have in spades is like the contact aspect, where like, if we do want to put together something or have a guest on or do X, Y, and Z, it's really nice to have put all the work in on the front end to probably reach out to almost anybody and to get people on a space,
You hit on a really good point, which is, and this is kind of what I've been feeling too, is one thing I agree with you 100%. I get DMs from people all the time where they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know your show was at this time and, won't happen again. And that kind of stuff. Almost kind of like there's an impression that people can own like certain slots of time or something. And I'm always like, gee, like it's good for me if there's multiple, Hedera related spaces happening at the same time. Like I have nothing wrong with that. Where my brain kind of goes is like, as someone who has a show in the ecosystem, my brain is kind of like, I kind of need to differentiate a little bit now. Like I watch and listen to so many shows that do such a great job with the news, and all sorts of different things like that. And for me, one of the challenges I've had is like, kind of like a bit of a pressure. Like I've been labeled a little bit in the ecosystem as like this guy who knows everything and is up to date on stuff. And it's all, you know, I'll be on space and people kind of be like, what's new? And I'll kind of be on top of stuff. So it's kind of like, I have this kind of pressure of like, you know, needing to be that kind of person with the information and stuff. But as you said, like it is really exhausting. And also too, it's like, I'm not really the best at it. Like there are other people that have had shows that have evolved so much in that regard. And a lot of the positive feedback I get about this show is like not so much about the news, and it's about some other different things. So it's like, I also get the sense like when it comes to programming and different things like that, now it's time to start differentiating a little bit. Like I started the show at a time in the ecosystem when there was like really no kind of news shows. And now there are so many great news shows. And I'm similar to yourself. It's like, you would think that someone would be like, oh no, there's more competition, but I think it's just exciting. It's kind of what we've been waiting for in a kind of way. But do you have that kind of similar feeling of like the need to differentiate a little bit, or overlap with other shows or different stuff like that? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here.
No, I mean, I think, well, like when we did the Mondelez or the SKUX interview, like I totally didn't realize, like I still do feel bad if like I overlap on top of somebody else's space that they already have planned. Like I reached out to you and I was like, oh shit.
Oh, right. You were one of those people.
I'm like, please, we want to co-host it. And you're like, no, I'm cool. I've got my own space to host today. And I'm like, I feel really bad. Look, I'll say this. I think this space, not just the Hedera space, but the Web3 space in general, is like really unique, where everybody does have the ability to kind of be, an individual with whatever they want to do. Like literally, I believe that almost anybody, even if you know nothing about crypto and blockchain, you could come into crypto and blockchain, and if you're willing to put 2 months of work in, or 3 months of studying in, or whatever it is, or you want to build something over time, you can literally create a career probably in less than a year.
Right.
And probably quicker if you go I want to learn how to, do some development stuff, maybe JavaScript, whatever route. You could probably almost immediately make 70 or 80 grand if you take a course that says it's 3 months and bang it out in a month. You could probably get a foot in the door somewhere almost immediately. When it comes to content and feeling the need to differentiate, no, I don't. I mean, sometimes I look at that from a number standpoint, where it's like, oh, I thought the space was going to do really good and it didn't. Maybe I need to build some more guests in or whatever. But I don't think anybody's really doing what I'm trying to do or we're trying to do. I mean, I see it, but not really. And I don't think anybody's really trying to do what you do either. When it comes down to like just nailing out all the content within the ecosystem, what I see a lot of is, let's just throw up a space and everybody comes up and talk. And
right.
That's great that you want to do that. I don't necessarily see a lot of value being extracted from all those spaces. It's either like a lot of pissed off retail or a lot of speculation, and all that stuff's fine. But it's like, if that's what you're trying to accomplish, great. Or if you're just trying to have fun, great. But I don't think people are like, for you and I, like, and this isn't meant to sound like whatever, I don't feel the need to necessarily differentiate too much, because I don't see a lot of other people putting the work in to actually put together spaces where value hopefully is extracted from.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think maybe differentiate's the wrong word then. Maybe what I'm thinking about is like doubling down on what brings the most value. Like for me, for example, a lot of times my spaces, which again, I think is something people like, kind of, as you said, is like, sometimes the spaces will literally just be me, kind of like radio show format, going over everything in the ecosystem. I think people get a lot of value from that. For me, I think that the highlights that this show has had, one common thread I've noticed about Hashgraph Enthusiasts is like the high points of the show happen when I'm having a conversation with someone that's kind of unprompted, right? That hasn't been planned, hasn't been organized. Someone will kind of come by and start having an off the cuff conversation. And like, I kind of want to see what I can do with the show to spend as much time in that kind of zone as possible. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I'm coming from. Like I'm realizing there's some spaces, or kind of, environments that get created when you do live content that you just don't get when you're doing kind of pre-recorded stuff, you know?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I got to hop in like 2 minutes, by the way. I think the one thing that I have tried to change recently is not putting so much work into like prepping for
Thank
space.
you.
If that makes sense.
Thank you for saying that.
And like, because I used to literally be, even with like the whole team internally and everybody else, I used to be like, look, I can't be bothered for like up to an hour and a half before a space because I'm doing research and I want to make sure I write down all the questions and I want to have everything planned out. And I've found like, and this was probably more of a recent change, like past 2 months. As long as I know a little bit about everybody and not write everything down and it's not scripted, but just like have everything down that I want to ask and all this stuff, I'm getting a lot more value just from kind of letting the conversation flow naturally. Yes. And I feel like it goes better that way anyways.
Yeah. Like I'm coming from, and thank you so much for saying that because I'm kind of in the same boat. And for me, I just feel the direction of the show heading into a place where it's like, why sit here and talk about a new update from Dovu or whatever? And like, why not just have them stop by and ask them about it? You know what I mean? In a very kind of informal way where it's not like an official, the guests this week are this person and that person and this person. It's like, kind of like there's some stuff happening in the ecosystem and it's about kind of these people. Maybe some of them will stop by, we'll talk about it. And I agree with you 100% in those moments is like when the most fascinating information is. Like, I'm learning more and more, like, the job of folks like you and I are to ask the dumb questions. And like, how can we do that if we like spend so much time obsessing over all the details? We kind of lose that balancing act a little bit, that excitement.
Well, and it makes it impossible to try to get into to try to host more things like this or have more discussions if you're spending so much time putting one discussion together. And I mean, we still do it. Like I intentionally, and I haven't done it over the past, couple of weeks, like haven't had really like a big cross chain space, but those things take a ton of work behind the scenes to put on. But like you said, it's a really good idea. We've thought about this before where it's like, look, here's a time. And this is when the, Hashgraph news and rumors or whatever, however you're branding it now, this is when the time and date is. And it's like, if you have new initiatives in this space, almost putting out a call to action to just be like, plan around this show. And it's like, you're going to release this in a blog post anyways. Why not come on and talk about it the day after, the same day, and like really kind of have a comprehensive, like hitting announcement where it's not just written. You can come on and talk about it with the community. I do think it's a give and take where like, it's nice to have a little bit of time in advance because then it makes the community aware of what's going to happen. But there's a way to overkill that too and just spend way too much time doing planning and not enough time doing content. As well as I do, if you're planning shit behind the scenes, nobody sees it and nobody sees the value there. So it's like you always have to have that battle of actually delivering content versus planning behind the scenes to deliver content because nobody sees the shit that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Well, man, I appreciate you coming by. It was great touching base with you just from like content creator to content creator. It's refreshing to kind of hear that we're all in the same boat a little bit. Everyone's just trying to do the best they can. And I mean, you guys are just killing it. That Spaces yesterday was dynamite. So really appreciate you, man, and all the support you've given to the show. It's been too long since I've had you on the show. So really appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, bro. Hey, have a good one, man. I'll hit you up. Absolutely.
Well, King Solomon, the legend, always great to have him stop by the show. And yeah, I think that, that's kind of the stories we've wanted to talk about. And I wanted to wrap up on the show, just kind of expanding on my thoughts on that and kind of, what's going on with the show. Basically, I've been doing this show for like a year, 2 years, almost. Yeah. Like coming up on 3 years. And for me, what's happened is the community, the ecosystem, the technology, and the platforms that I use to, publish the show, they've all changed so much. And the show hasn't really changed so much as lots of experiments have happened with the show. And I've really tried a ton of different things over the years. different platforms, different production stuff, different formats. And I've tried so many different things. And the benefit of that is I've got a lot of feedback from people. And I think listeners of the show that have been tuning in for a long time have kind of experienced a lot of that kind of stuff. They've got an idea of what the show can be. And I kind of want to, at this point, kind of figure out, well, exactly what is the show? We've reached a point where I think I can start to ask people and kind of be like, what is this show? What do you like about this show? What do you not like about this show? What would you do if you were producing this show, right? If you were in charge of running the show? I think that the incubation period for Hashgraph Enthusiasts has kind of ended now, and it's time to really get a firm understanding of what's working really well. What do people like not really like? And my hypothesis is this. I think that I'm way more aligned with the audience than I think. And I think that some of the things I'm doing with the show, like I'm just doing because other people do it, and I don't want to be doing a show that you could get anywhere else. Like I said, a lot of the highlights of the show, a lot of the things that I hear so much positive feedback about don't have a ton to do with the meat and potato of the show. And so I think that there's parts of this show, things that I do that people really love, that they just want more of. And knowing what that is and just doing more of that. Because my hypothesis is those things are things that I also want too. And because of some kind of arbitrary limitation or restriction or whatever I have on the show that's kind of built up over time, just got to let go of it. And again, things have changed. Like I'm on Twitter Spaces right now and I see myself on video. We've got a video version of the show. One of the big things I want to do is, have this show, instead of just being able to listen to it on Spaces, go to YouTube and tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and watch the live Hashgraph Enthusiasts show. Right now, that video version is only recorded. So there's a lot of stuff I want to do, but it's time to more formally ask the listeners and viewers of the show and fans, like, hey, what do you think? Like, what do we want to do together with this? Because it's not just about the stuff that you watch with Hashgraph Enthusiasts and me talking. It's also like other ways you interact with the show and get value from it and actually start using the Hedera network a little more for other aspects of the show. Expanding the show just beyond the hours between, 12 and 2 p.m. Eastern that we have together on the show. So anyways, I think that I'm kind of at a phase now where so much has changed with me. So much has changed with the community and the ecosystem. The show's grown so much. There's that success there. And so much has changed with the ways in which I can get the show out there. So I think that's great. And I think that the challenge is figuring out what exactly to do. Now that we have a history of the show, this is a multi-year show. There's a lot to kind of reflect on. So I think that what I'm going to be doing, and the favor I want to ask to listeners and viewers of the show, is I'm going to put out a survey, probably like a Google form. I want it to be pretty simple and just get feedback from people. And it'll help me determine the next direction for the show. I want to really make it something that is something that we love. And the other thing too is like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the opinion of people is like, leave it exactly as is. And if that's the case, then I'm doing that anyways. I love it. So I think that's where I'm at, is I'm getting a feeling of big change needed. And I want to kind of check in with people and see if folks are feeling that too. And, it's great for King Solomon to stop by, and it's kind of like, yeah, stuff's changing. You gotta change yourself. And I love that he kind of hit on the research component and stuff like that, because it's a lot of work. And I think that one of the big things with this show is there's like this news and interviews side to Hashgraph Enthusiasts. And recently I've focused a lot on the news portion of the show, just because, news is a really, really hard thing to do. And I now have some like really efficient workflows and really great ways to do research and all that kind of stuff. I think it's now time to focus more on the interview side of stuff. That's a given. But also, just availability of the show, formatting, all that kind of stuff, streamlining. What do people want, right? I want to figure out what's going on. So stay tuned. There's a survey coming. Again, it's just gonna be like a Google form, really simple, but it's going to be a big help to me to figure out exactly, what people want, where to go next, new ideas. That's the other thing too, is like, I'm pretty sure so many people out there who listen to the show have like awesome ideas that I've never even thought of before. That would just be amazing that, maybe they haven't had an opportunity to share with me yet. So that's the other thing, that I'm excited about. So anyways, that's my thoughts. Again, it was great for King Solomon to stop by and chat about that. I feel seen. I feel heard. But yeah, there's a part of me, I have this whole kind of like script and all sorts of different things that I use for the show that to me, like there's a little part of me that's like, oh, what if we just threw it all away? What if we just threw away all the rules and all the plans and everything and just like, had no plan going into it and everything. So maybe there's a part of my brain that's kind of like that. Like, I have a lot of fun in live moments where I just have a random person on the show and they just show up and have a great convo. So I don't know. I'm in an open headspace. I'm in a headspace ready for change. I just think there's going to be so much exciting things coming for this show. We're going to, expand out of just live audio, right? We're going to do live video, the podcast. It's going to be a lot of work. That's for sure. But that's why I have supporters for the show. Like the support's already been given. What I need, I have what I need, which is great. So it's just a beautiful situation. A great show, great thriving show. I've got the resources I need. And what I'm looking for now is just some thoughts from the community, cool ideas, fresh perspectives. Again, like what would you do with this show if you were running it, if it was your show? And yeah, I want to have a lot more fun too. I think there's room for more fun. It's also a different market, right? This show has had a pretty serious tone, for a long time, just because I think, it's been a pretty serious time and things are lightening up a little bit. The market's changing. And I think that there's room for some more goofy stuff as well. I had a lot of fun doing like the Oreo bit and everything. So I don't know, letting down the curtain a little bit. And it's so weird too, like on the spaces looking down at my video. It's always weird. Hello, everybody down there. But yeah, anyways, on that note, again, another huge shout out to folks, supporting the show, all that good stuff. I literally couldn't do it without you guys just sending HBAR to an address. It means a lot to me. And I think that we're going to find, I think this show, Hashgraph Enthusiasts, is going to start using the network more. I think that's really what I want to do. I want to start using the network more. Here's some ideas that I've had. I've been thinking about, maybe like some NFT type stuff that could happen, some point stuff that could happen, not really like to generate revenue for the show, but more so to like give value and recognition to people that have supported the show. I think that's one benefit of now, like I work at, a company, Hgraph, that like runs a mirror node and is focused on data and all that kind of stuff. So like I'm getting more exposed to like ways in which you can kind of like quantify stuff on the network and everything. And I think like I'd love to use the network to like find all of these previous supporters of the show, give them a little piece of the show somehow, create new ways, new access. I don't know. I've been thinking about a bunch of different things, especially like when we look at, HCS 20 and points and Hashinals and everything like that. So something else I'm pretty sure that all you folks could kind of help me out with as well. But also I'm a little bit low energy still. I'm still getting over kind of the cold. I'm feeling a lot better. I'm sounding horrible, but I'm feeling a lot better. But yeah, I think that I'm in the same boat as a lot of people coming into this new bear market. And it's like, someone just commented they can't see the video anymore. So I think that there's a situation where the video is cutting in and out for people. I don't know. We're going to be doing live streaming on YouTube anyway soon. So the Spaces video stuff, maybe it'll get more advanced and maybe we'll get cooler. Right now, it's literally just like me sitting here with my phone camera. I don't know if people on the show can see, but it's like literally just my selfie camera. It's kind of funny. It's cool though. I mean, it works. But is there anything else to talk about? No, nothing else to talk about. Again, shout out to King Solomon for stopping by the show. Always a pleasure to have him on. Tune in later today, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific for HBAR Foundation. I'm going to be joining to talk about Hgraph, talk about some cool stuff we're working on. It'll be really, really cool. Yeah, I appreciate the comments too. Folks are leaving comments of like maybe some ideas for the show and stuff like right now live. So I appreciate that. I would say stay tuned for the survey and throw that in there. So I definitely love to get some opinions on that. That's the mode I'm entering. I'm entering the mode of asking people what they want for the show. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. So I would say, yeah, let's wrap up the show. I think that my takeaways this week and why I kind of called the show kind of like, what is this show even? Is, yeah, I feel like the show's grown. It's floating around up in space, and I'm ready to kind of get on some solid ground with the show. Lots of experiments have happened, but now it's time to, you know, really get serious about it, which I'm excited about. And then more broadly, it's like, I look at this ecosystem, I look at this community, the Hedera community, and then the Web3 industry more broadly, even like looking at, you know, my experience at Ethereum Denver with all those other networks and meeting, you know, Charles and everybody. It's like, there's a part of me that sees not only the kind of monetary shift with a bull market and technology shift with a bull market, but like the people shift with a bull market, the attitude shift, a weight being lifted off. I kind of feel that a little bit. I don't know if people feel that, but I'm definitely kind of feeling that in this ecosystem of like, there's a little less pressure now. There's a little less stress. The attitude has changed a little bit. And I kind of want to take advantage of that. You know, it feels like it's been cloudy and now it's sunny. And it's like, I want to go outside, right? I want to see what's going on. I want to see what's going on with everybody else. More so than I have been. I think a lot of people have just kind of been in survival mode. You know, I'm pretty surprised still that I managed to keep a career in Web3 over this bear market. And I mean, shout out to everyone else who has as well, but just so grateful to just be in this ecosystem, be in this industry, be doing what I'm doing. I just want to do more of it. And with that, again, huge shout out. Everything you need to know about the show, hashgraph.news. Go and check it out. Pinned tweet to the top of the spaces has more info. And stay tuned for that survey I'm going to be putting out. Very interested to hear the community feedback. Awesome stories today we talked about. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good, everybody. Hello, future. Goodbye, past.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.
I think one of the best things is this theme song.